The stars twinkled in the vast expanse of space as Lyra's sleek, crystalline ship glided through the cosmos. Her iridescent skin shimmered with excitement, casting a soft glow throughout the cockpit. As the lead xenobiologist from the planet Lumina, Lyra had dedicated her life to studying the diverse forms of life across the galaxy. Her current mission was perhaps the most intriguing yet, to observe and document the reproductive practices of various species. Lyra's antenna twitched with anticipation as she approached her next destination, a small blue planet on the outskirts of the Milky Way. According to the limited data in the Galactic archives, this world, called Earth by its inhabitants, was home to a species known as humans. They were classified as primitive by Luminan standards, but something about their entry in the database had piqued Lyra's curiosity. As she entered Earth's atmosphere, Lyra's ship suddenly began to shudder. Warning lights flashed across her control panel, and a high-pitched alarm filled the air. "By the celestial spheres," Lyra exclaimed, her delicate fingers dancing across the controls in a desperate attempt to stabilize her craft. "What in the name of the cosmic creators is happening?" The ship's AI responded in its calm, melodious voice, "Warning. Unknown electromagnetic interference detected. Navigation systems compromised. Prepare for emergency landing." Lyra's heart raced as her ship plummeted towards the planet's surface. Through the viewscreen, she caught glimpses of vast oceans, green land masses, and clusters of artificial structures. In her final moments of descent, she spotted a patch of open land near one of the largest settlements. With a deafening crash and a shower of sparks, Lyra's ship plowed into a grassy field on the outskirts of a bustling city. The impact sent her tumbling from her seat, her slender form cushioned by the ship's safety protocols. As the dust settled, Lyra giddily picked herself up, assessing the damage to both herself and her vessel. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the circumstances. The A's voice crackled through damaged speakers, hull integrity at 62%. Life support systems functional. Communication array offline. Cloaking device compromised. Lyra's antenna drooped slightly at the news. She was stranded on an alien world, her presence exposed. This was far from the discreet observation she had planned. Taking a deep breath, she steeled herself for what lay ahead. "Well," she mused, "I suppose this is one way to conduct a close-up study." As she prepared to exit her ship, Lyra activated her universal translator and slipped on a simple silver band, a device capable of projecting a holographic disguise that would help her blend in with the local population. With a shimmer of light, her alien features were obscured, replaced by the appearance of a tall, striking woman with long, silver hair and vibrant violet eyes. Lyra emerged from her ship, blinking in the bright sunlight of her new surroundings. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents and sounds. In the distance, she could see the towering structures of the human settlement, a far cry from the elegant spires of her homeworld. No sooner had she taken her first steps on Earth's soil than she heard a chorus of gasps and exclamations. Turning, Lyra found herself face to face with a group of young humans, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear, awe, and curiosity. "Holy cow!" one of the humans exclaimed, a device held up in front of him. "Did you guys see that? A freaking spaceship just crashed." Lyra's translator worked overtime, deciphering the strange idioms and colloquialisms. She raised her hands in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Greetings, Earth dwellers," she said, her voice melodious and slightly accented. "I come in peace and with great curiosity about your world." The humans exchanged glances, their initial shock giving way to excitement. One of them, a young woman with curly hair and glasses, stepped forward. Are you an alien?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Lyra nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Indeed, I am not of your world. My name is Lyra, and I come from a planet called Lumina. I am a researcher, here to learn about your species and your ways." The group of humans erupted into a flurry of questions and exclamations. Lyra's antenna twitched beneath her holographic disguise, overwhelmed by the sudden barrage of inquiry. She held up a hand, attempting to calm the excited crowd. "Please," he said, her voice gentle but firm. "I understand your curiosity as I share it, but perhaps we could begin with introductions. And then, if you're willing, I would be most grateful for your assistance in understanding your world." The curly-haired woman who had first spoken stepped forward again, adjusting her glasses nervously. "I'm Sarah," she said, offering a hesitant smile. "I'm a biology student at the local university. These are my friends, Tom, Aisha, and Miguel." Lyra inclined her head in greeting to each of them, fascinated by the diversity of appearances among this small group of humans. "It's a pleasure to meet you all. I must admit, this isn't quite how I planned my arrival on your planet. My ship seems to have been affected by some kind of interference." Tom, a tall young man with a mop of unruly brown hair, piped up. That was probably the new experimental radio telescope they just fired up at the university. "It's been messing with all kinds of signals lately." Laura's eyes lit up with interest. "Fascinating. Your species is exploring the cosmos through radio waves. How wonderfully curious." As the group continued to chat, more humans began to gather, drawn by the commotion and the sight of the crashed ship. Lara could hear sirens in the distance, growing louder by the moment. Sarah looked concerned. Lyra, I think we should probably get you out of here. The authorities will be here soon, and I'm not sure how they'll react to, well, you." Lyra nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Yes, I believe a hasty retreat would be wise. My mission was meant to be one of covert observation, not a public spectacle." Miguel, a stocky young man with a friendly face, spoke up. "You can come to our place. We share an apartment near the university. It's not far from here." Grateful for the offer, Laura quickly retrieved a small bag of essential equipment from her ship. With a final, wistful glance at her damaged vessel, she allowed Sarah and her friends to lead her away from the crash site, just as the first official vehicles began to arrive. As they hurried through the streets, Lara's senses were overwhelmed by the sights, sounds, and smells of the human city. The cacophony of traffic, the towering buildings, the diverse faces of the people they passed, it was all so different from the serene, ordered world she had left behind. "I must say," Lara commented as they walked, "your world is fascinatingly chaotic. How do you manage to function amidst such vibrant disorder?" Aisa, a petite woman with dark skin and a mischievous smile, laughed. "That's just life on Earth for you. Organized chaos is kind of our thing." They arrived at a modest apartment building, and Miguel ushered them inside. As they climbed the stairs, Lyra's mind raced with questions. This impromptu immersion into human society was far from her original plan, but it presented an unprecedented opportunity for her research. Once inside the apartment, the group collectively breathed a sigh of relief. Laura took in her surroundings: the cluttered living space, the walls adorned with posters and photographs, the air thick with the scent of what she would later learn was called coffee. "So," Tom said, flopping down onto a worn couch, "what exactly brought you to Earth, Lyra? Aside from crash landing in our backyard, I mean." Lyra hesitated for a moment, considering how best to explain her mission. "Well," she began, her holographic cheeks taking on a slight blush, "I'm a xenobiologist, specializing in the study of reproduction across different species. Earth has been something of a mystery to us, and I was sent to learn more about how humans perpetuate your species." The room fell silent for a moment before erupting into a mixture of laughter, gasps, and exclamations of disbelief. Wait, Aisha said, holding up her hands. "You're telling me you came all the way across the galaxy to learn about how humans have sex?" Laura's antenna twitched beneath her disguise, picking up on the sudden spike in pheromones and emotional energy in the room. "Is that not an appropriate topic of discussion?" she asked, genuinely confused. Sarah, her face flushed but her eyes sparkling with scientific curiosity, stepped in. "It's not that it's inappropriate exactly. It's just, well, It's a pretty personal topic for most humans. But as a fellow scientist, I have to say, I'm incredibly curious about your research. Maybe we can help each other learn. As the initial shock wore off, the group settled into a lively discussion. Laura found herself bombarded with questions about her own species and planet, even as she tried to steer the conversation towards her area of study. "So, how do Luminians reproduce?" Miguel asked, leaning forward with interest. Lyra's holographic disguise shimmered slightly as she considered the question. "Well, on Lumina, reproduction is a harmonious blending of energies. When two Luminians choose to create new life, they enter a meditative state and allow their bioluminescent auras to merge. The resulting energy coalescence eventually forms into a new Luminian." The humans exchanged glances, a mixture of awe and skepticism on their faces. "That sounds beautiful," Sarah said softly, "but also very different from how things work here on Earth." Lyra nodded eagerly. "Yes, I've gathered that human reproduction is a more physical process, but I'm afraid the details are quite vague in our galactic database. Perhaps you could enlighten me." The room erupted into nervous laughter and awkward glances. Tom cleared his throat. Maybe we should start with the basics of human biology first. Work our way up to the complicated stuff." As the night wore on, Laura found herself immersed in an impromptu crash course on human anatomy, biology, and the basics of Earth's ecosystems. Her new friends, initially wary, soon warmed to her genuine curiosity and gentle nature. But as fascinating as the scientific discussions were, Laura couldn't help but notice the complex web of emotions and unspoken communication flowing between the humans. The way Sarah's eyes lingered on Tom when he spoke, the subtle shift in Miguel's posture when Aisha laughed at his jokes. It was a dance of interaction far more intricate than anything in her research had prepared her for. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Laura realized that her quest to understand human reproduction had opened the door to a much greater mystery: the complexity of human relationships and emotions. With a mixture of excitement and trepidation, Laura understood that her unexpected crash landing was just the beginning of what promised to be the most fascinating research expedition of her career. As she watched her new human friends yawn and stretch, preparing for their day ahead, Lyra knew that the real adventure was only just beginning. This passage appears to be an excerpt from a science fiction story involving an alien named Lyra interacting with a group of humans. The narrative touches on themes of cultural exchange, curiosity about biological differences, and the complexity of human emotions and relationships. The scene depicts Lyra, presumably an alien researcher, engaging in a discussion about reproduction with a group of humans. Her own species' method of reproduction is described as something beautiful and very different from Earth's, which piques the curiosity of the humans. However, when Lyra asks about human reproduction, the humans become awkward and suggest starting with more basic biological concepts. As the night progresses, Lyra receives an impromptu lesson on human biology and Earth's ecosystems. The narrative emphasizes her genuine curiosity and how it helps the initially wary humans warm up to her. An interesting aspect of the story is Lyra's growing awareness of the non-verbal communication and emotional undercurrents among the humans. She notices subtle interactions like lingering glances and changes in body language, realizing that these complex social dynamics were not covered in her prior research. The passage concludes with Lyra's realization that her accidental arrival on Earth is the beginning of a much larger adventure. She recognizes that understanding human relationships and emotions will be a fascinating challenge beyond her original research goals. This story seems to explore themes of cross-cultural understanding, the universality of curiosity, and the complexity of human social interactions from an outsider's perspective. It also touches on the idea that sometimes the most valuable discoveries come from unexpected places or events. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Lyra found herself alone in the living room. The humans had retreated to their respective bedrooms, mumbling about catching a few hours of sleep before facing the day ahead. Lyra, requiring no sleep herself, took the opportunity to process the wealth of information she had gathered overnight. She pulled out her datapad, fingers flying over the holographic interface as she organized her notes. Biology, ecology, social structures, it was all fascinating, but barely scratched the surface of what she sensed was a far more complex reality. A soft meow interrupted her thoughts. Laura looked down to see a small, furry creature rubbing against her leg. "Ah, you must be a cat," she said softly, recalling Tom's brief mention of pets. "Felis catus, if I'm not mistaken." The cat purred, jumping onto the couch next to her. Laura hesitated, then gently stroked its fur, marveling at the texture. "Interesting. You seem to serve no immediate practical purpose, yet the humans clearly value your presence. Another mystery to unravel, I suppose." As the morning progressed, Laura heard stirring from the bedrooms. Sarah was the first to emerge, hair tousled and eyes still heavy with sleep. She shuffled into the kitchen, making a beeline for a machine on the counter. "Good morning, Sarah," Lyra said brightly. "I hope your sleep cycle was restful. I've been contemplating the information shared last night and have several follow-up questions, particularly regarding the endocrine system's role in human reproduction and pair bonding. Also, I'm curious about the cultural significance of the bitter-smelling beverage you're preparing. Is it a morning ritual?" Sarah blinked slowly, clutching her mug of coffee. "Lyra," she said with a yawn, "you're lovely, but it's way too early for biology lessons. Let me finish this coffee, and then we can talk." Lyra nodded, making a mental note. "Ah, I see. The morning consumption of this coffee seems to be linked to improved cognitive function and social receptiveness. Fascinating." As the other humans gradually emerged from their rooms, Laura observed their morning routines with keen interest. The dynamic of the group shifted in subtle ways. Morning greetings were shorter, physical contact was minimal, and everyone seemed focused on personal tasks rather than group interaction. By mid-morning, as the effects of coffee and showers began to take hold, Laura noticed another shift. The humans became more animated, more willing to engage. Tom suggested they all go out for brunch, a concept Lyra was eager to experience. As they left the apartment, Laura felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Her first real venture into human society lay ahead, full of potential for new discoveries and the risk of accidental cultural faux pas. But with her new friends by her side, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in her mission to understand the intricacies of human life. Little did Lyra know that her presence was about to cause quite a stir in the quiet neighborhood cafe, setting in motion a chain of events that would change not just her life, but the course of human-alien relations forever. Zira's fascination with Earth deepened over the next few days. Jake, the young biology teacher, had become her unofficial guide, introducing her to various aspects of human culture. As they strolled through a busy marketplace, the alien marveled at the vibrant sights, sounds, and smells surrounding her. Stalls brimming with colorful fabrics, exotic foods, and handcrafted items caught her attention at every turn. "Everything here is so alive," Zira mused, her violet eyes gleaming with curiosity. "On Luminara, everything is more structured, more predictable. You humans live in chaos, yet it seems to work." Jake chuckled as he watched her absorb the environment. "Yeah, I guess you could say that. We thrive in our chaos, I suppose." As they walked, Zira paused at a street musician playing a soulful tune on a guitar. The music seemed to speak to her on a deeper level, and she closed her eyes, allowing the melody to wash over her. "Music," she said softly. This is something unique. We do not have this on my planet." Jake raised an eyebrow, surprised. "No music? That's hard to imagine. Music is a huge part of our culture. It's how we express our emotions, our stories, even our history." Zira nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps this is what I've been missing in my understanding of humans. You express what you cannot say with words. The emotions I sense around me, they are reflected in this art form. Fascinating." They continued their walk, eventually arriving at a small park where a group of children played. Zira observed them with intense interest. "Your young ones are so free-spirited. They learn through experience, through trial and error." Jake smiled. "Exactly. It's how we grow, by making mistakes and learning from them." Zira's gaze lingered on a group of teenagers laughing and joking nearby. "And yet you avoid certain topics," she said, glancing at Jake with a knowing look. "Like reproduction." Jake's face flushed again, but he managed to keep his composure this time. "It's not that we avoid it. It's just, well, it's a personal subject. There's a lot of cultural and social nuances around it." Zira tilted her head. "On Luminora, reproduction is a simple biological process. But here, it seems to be intertwined with emotions, relationships, and rituals. This is what confuses me." Jake scratched the back of his neck, trying to find the right words. "Yeah, it's a lot more complicated for us. It's not just about biology. It's about connection, love, trust. It's, well, a big deal." Zira absorbed his words, her expression thoughtful. "I see. So it is not merely a function of survival for your species. It is part of your emotional experience." Jake nodded. "Exactly." Suddenly, Zira's eyes lit up with excitement. "Then, I must understand this. I want to experience your emotions, your connections. How do you love?" Jake froze, caught off guard by her directness. Well, love is complicated too. It's something that builds over time, through shared experiences, trust, and understanding." Zira took a step closer, her gaze intense. "Then let us experience it. Teach me how to love as humans do." Jake's heart raced. It's not something you can just learn overnight. It takes time, patience. Zira's frustration was palpable. "Why do humans make everything so complex? On my planet, we analyze, we understand, and we move forward. Here, everything seems to take time." Jake smiled gently. "Because that's part of being human. It's the journey, not the destination, that matters." Zira fell silent, her sharp mind processing his words. For the first time, she seemed to grasp the depth of human existence, not just the physical world around her, but the intricate web of emotions and connections that defined humanity. As they stood there in the park, surrounded by the noise and chaos of life, Zira realized that her journey on Earth was just beginning. She had come to learn about humans, but what she had discovered was far beyond her initial expectations. "Perhaps," she said softly, "there is more to being human than I had imagined." Jake nodded, smiling. "Yeah, there definitely is." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Zira felt something she had never experienced before, a sense of belonging, of connection. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just observing a species, she was becoming part of their world. Zira had always prided herself on her logical mind, her ability to process information rapidly and make decisions with precision. On Luminara, everything was orderly, controlled. Emotions were carefully managed, if they existed at all. Her people were efficient, never weighed down by the messy complications of personal relationships or the unpredictability of feelings. Yet, here on Earth, Zira was beginning to see that those very complications, the emotions, the connections, were at the core of what made humanity so formidable. Over the next few weeks, Zira continued her immersion into human culture. Jake became her closest ally, though he seemed to struggle with the fact that he was also becoming her subject of study. He had tried to explain to her that humans didn't like being analyzed like test subjects, but Zira found it difficult to switch off her instinct to observe, to learn. Every interaction, every glance, every smile or frown fascinated her. She spent time with more humans, children, elderly citizens, workers, artists. She observed the subtle ways they communicated without words, a pat on the back, a raised eyebrow, a shared laugh. These non-verbal cues intrigued her deeply. Luminara had no equivalent. Her people communicated efficiently, with only the most necessary words exchanged. But here, on Earth, silence could speak volumes. A touch could convey more than 1,000 words. One evening, Jake took her to an art exhibit. As they wandered through the gallery, Zira was confronted with another aspect of humanity that baffled her: art. She stood in front of a painting, her brow furrowed, struggling to understand what the splashes of color on the canvas meant. "What is this supposed to represent?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine confusion. Jake smiled, standing beside her. "It's abstract. It doesn't represent anything specific. It's about what you feel when you look at it." Zira turned to him, her frustration evident. "But that makes no sense. How can something exist without purpose? Everything in the universe has a function, a reason for being. This is chaos." Jake shrugged. "Sometimes the beauty is in the chaos. Not everything has to have a logical explanation. Sometimes it's just about experiencing it." Zira shook her head, trying to process his words. "Your species is obsessed with this idea of experience. It is so inefficient. On Luminora, we create things with purpose, with clarity. Here, you create things just for the sake of creating them." "Exactly," Jake said, his tone gentle. "That's part of being human. We don't just live to survive. We live to create, to express, to feel." Zara turned back to the painting, her mind racing. She was beginning to understand that the human way of life was fundamentally different from anything she had ever known. They didn't just live to exist. They lived to experience, to explore the depths of their emotions, their creativity, and their connections with one another. But this understanding only led to more questions. If emotions and connections were so central to human existence, why were they also the cause of so much conflict? In her time on Earth, Zira had witnessed both the best and worst of humanity. She had seen people come together to help one another, but she had also seen anger, jealousy, and even violence. It was clear that humans were capable of great compassion, but they were also capable of deep hatred. One night, Zira and Jake sat together on a rooftop, looking out over the city. The air was cool, and the lights of the buildings below twinkled like stars in the distance. Zira had been quiet all evening, her mind occupied with the complexity of human emotions. "You're thinking about something," Jake said, breaking the silence. Zira nodded. "I do not understand how your species can be so capable of love and yet so capable of hate. It seems contradictory." Jake sighed, leaning back against the wall. "Yeah, it does. But that's part of being human. We're not perfect. We're full of contradictions. We love, but we also fight. We create, but we also destroy. It's messy." Zira frowned, her analytical mind struggling to reconcile these contradictions. On Luminora, such extremes would be considered dangerous. We strive for balance, for control. Your species seems to embrace the lack of it. Jake nodded. "I guess we do. It's what makes us who we are. The bad stuff, it's part of the deal. But the friendship, what makes life worth living." Looked out at the city, her violet eyes reflecting the lights below. "And you believe that the good outweighs the bad." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the distant hum of the city below. Zira was beginning to understand the paradox of humanity. They were a species defined by their contradictions. They were capable of great beauty and great destruction, of love and hate, of order and chaos. And yet, despite these contradictions, or perhaps because of them, they had survived and thrived. For the first time, began to see why the Galactic Council feared humanity. It wasn't just their technology or their resilience. It was their unpredictability, their ability to swing between extremes and adapt to any situation. Humanity couldn't be neatly categorized or understood through logic alone. They were a species that defied reason, a species that embraced the chaos of their emotions and used it to fuel their growth. As the night wore on, turned to Jake. "Your species, you are far more complex than I ever imagined." Smiled, a small tentative smile that surprised even her. She had spent her entire life avoiding emotions, believing them to be a weakness. But here on Earth, she was beginning to see that emotions were not a weakness at all. They were a strength a driving force that made humans adaptable, creative, and resilient. In that moment, realized that her mission was no longer about simply studying humanity. It was about understanding them, truly understanding what it meant to be human. She had come to Earth to learn, but now she saw that the real challenge would be learning to embrace the very emotions she had been taught to suppress. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, welcomed the uncertainty. After all, wasn't that what it meant to be human? The days that followed felt like a blur too. The more time she spent on Earth, the deeper she found herself entangled in its complexities. She began to recognize that the contradictions within humanity weren't just frustrating mysteries. They were the essence of what made humans remarkable. But these realizations didn't come without challenges. Every time Zara thought she had grasped an understanding of what it meant to be human, she encountered something that turned her perception on its head. One evening, as Zara sat in the dim light of a cozy cafe in the heart of the city, she found herself engaged in a heated conversation with Jake and a few of his friends. They were discussing the very nature of progress, and once again, Zara's view clashed with theirs. Humanity is so focused on individual progress, on emotional expression, that you fail to see how inefficient it is. Every one of you has different goals, different desires. On Luminara, we share one purpose, one goal for the collective good. There is no confusion, no conflict of interest. Jake's friend, Maya, shook her head in response. But that's exactly what makes us human, Zara. We're driven by our individual passions, and that's what leads to innovation, creativity, and progress. Sure, it's messy, but it's that messiness that makes life rich. Jake leaned back in his chair, watching Zara closely. The problem is, Zara, you're still thinking of things in terms of efficiency. But life isn't a calculation. You can't produce everything to a formula. Zara frowned, her sharp mind grappling with their words. But why not? If your species could streamline its efforts, you'd advance far more quickly. All of your energy could be directed toward a singular purpose. Maya smiled softly. Maybe. But we would lose so much in the process. Think about all the great things humans have created: art, literature, music, and even scientific discoveries. They came from individuals with different perspectives, not from a hive mind. Those differences are our strength, not a weakness. Zara opened her mouth to argue, but the words caught in her throat. She had been taught her whole life that individuality was a flaw, something that needed to be subdued for the greater good. Yet here, on Earth, individuality was celebrated. It was woven into the very fabric of human society. The more she interacted with these humans, the more she realized that their strength lay in their diversity of thought. Zara felt a pang of discomfort. This revelation contradicted everything she had been taught. Back on Luminara, she would have been disciplined for such thoughts. But here, she found herself embracing the idea that maybe just was merit in the human way of doing things. And yet, she still couldn't shake her loyalty to the ideals of unity and purpose. Over the next few days, Zara threw herself into observing more aspects of human life. She visited schools, where children, tiny, curious versions of adults, asked endless questions and explored the world with boundless energy. She attended concerts, where music seemed to invoke a kind of emotional connection that transcended words. She even joined Jake on a visit to a rural farm, where families worked together, their lives intertwined with the land in ways that were foreign to her. Each experience left Zara more fascinated by the intricacies of human existence, but it was one particular event that left the deepest mark on the funeral of a human she had never met. Jake had received a message early one morning. His great-uncle, an elderly man Zara had never heard him mention, had passed away. Without hesitation, Jake invited her to come with him, though she wasn't sure why he wanted her there. Still, she agreed, curious to observe yet another aspect of human culture. The funeral took place in a serene cemetery, nestled beneath towering trees that swayed gently in the breeze. The day was overcast, and the air carried a sense of quiet reverence. People gathered, dressed in dark clothing, their faces somber. Some embraced, offering comfort to one another, while others stood in quiet reflection. Zero watched with an analytical eye as the ceremony unfolded. She had seen death before, of course. On Luminara, death was treated as a logical conclusion, the natural end of life. There were no elaborate rituals or expressions of grief. The deceased was simply returned to the soil and life continued. But here on Earth, the mourning was palpable. As the eulogies were spoken, Zara observed the raw emotions etched on the faces of the humans around her. She could sense the pain, the sorrow, and yet there was something more, a deep connection that united these people in their shared loss. Jake stood beside her, his expression unreadable, but Zara could feel the tension in his posture. When the time came for Jake to place a flower on his great-uncle's grave, Zara found herself watching him intently. He hesitated for a moment, his hand gripping the delicate flower tightly. Then, with a quiet sigh, he placed it gently atop the freshly turned soil. Afterward, as the mourners dispersed, Jake and Zara stood alone by the grave. Zara could see the weight of the moment pressing down on him. For the first time, she understood the depth of human connections, not just in life, but in death as well. "It's strange, isn't it?" Jake said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "How someone can be gone, but that impact lingers." Zara looked at him, her brow furrowed. On Luminara, death is seen as an inevitable outcome. There is no ceremony, no mourning. We accept it as part of life's cycle. But here, this is different. Jake nodded, his gaze fixed on the grave. Humans have a hard time letting go. We hold on to memories, to feelings, even when the person is no longer here. It's what makes loss so painful. Zara was silent for a moment, processing his words. But why put yourselves through such pain? Would it not be more efficient to let go, to move on without this attachment? Jake smiled faintly, though there was sadness in his eyes. Maybe, but we don't work that way. We form bonds, deep ones. And those bonds shape who we are, even when the people we love are gone. It's messy, yeah, but it's also beautiful. Zara turned her gaze back to the grave, her mind swirling with thoughts. She had never considered the value of such deep emotional connections before. To her, they had always seemed like a hindrance, something that clouded judgment and led to inefficiency. But now she was beginning to see them differently. As they left the cemetery, Zara felt a strange mix of emotions. She had always prided herself on her logic, on her ability to remain detached and objective. But now she found herself questioning the very nature of that detachment. Was it truly a strength, or was it a barrier that kept her from understanding the full richness of life? That night, as she lay in the small apartment Jake had lent her, Zara found herself thinking about her own people. The Luminarian way of life was one of order, precision, and unity. But now she wondered if they had sacrificed something valuable in their pursuit of efficiency. Had they lost their humanity?